The message came at 2:17 a.m., but I didn't see it until I poured my first cup of coffee at 6. My phone buzzed quietly across the counter. The subject line read, "Urgent. You need to see this, Jeff." Attached was a PDF. It was a scanned copy of a contract. My signature, George's signature, and a third one, someone I didn't recognize. The company we built, Forge and Flint Innovations, was no longer mine. The shares I'd spent 10 years growing were signed away in a midnight deal I knew nothing about. I dropped my mug. It shattered. My hand trembled as I scrolled further. A final clause in bold. Jeffrey A. Lane relinquishes all ownership rights and intellectual property claims as of June 12th, yesterday. That bastard. George sold me out. My name is Jeffrey Lane. I'm 36 years old, a product engineer by trade, a builder by obsession. I've always had a gift for spotting the invisible, design flaws in products, inefficiencies in systems, the quiet needs no one bothers to solve. That instinct turned Forge and Flint into a $1 million startup in under 5 years. We created adaptive tech, smart tools that help disabled individuals regain control over their daily lives. It started with a voice-controlled arm brace for my uncle, who lost mobility after a stroke. Then came the smart canes, modular home interfaces, wearable haptic guides. We didn't just build gadgets, we built freedom. And George, my so-called partner, was supposed to be the business brain behind the mission. He was magnetic, the guy who made VC meetings feel like TED Talks, who could sip a whiskey with sharks and walk away with a check. I handled the prototypes. He handled the people. I trusted him with everything. Every patent, every file, every roadmap. I should have known. George and I met in college. Two broke dreamers in a shared dorm room, always high on ambition and cheap ramen. He was the friend who saw my sketches and said, "You're going to change the world." We'd pulled each other out of failure more than once. When my mother died in my second year, George booked my flight and packed my bags. When his startup flopped, I invited him into Forge and Flint, without hesitation. We were brothers, in all but blood. Or so I thought. In hindsight, the signs were there, him pushing me to focus on creation while he handled the contracts, telling me not to worry when I asked about investor updates, promising we'd split the glory when the company hit Series C. Turns out he meant it literally, split it, and take my half. They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies. They say it comes from someone close enough to whisper your name as they twist the knife. I didn't just hear the knife, I watched it slide in, slow. It started with an email, not from George, not from the board, from Liza. Subject line, "You need to see this, Jeff, I'm sorry." Attached was a multi-page document. Scanned contracts, signed PDFs, legal filings I didn't recognize. My name was on them, my signature, only I had never signed them. The first file was titled, Transfer of Intellectual Property Agreement - Jeffrey A. Lane. The timestamp said June 12th, 11:43 p.m. I stared at it. Heartbeat heavy in my chest. The lines blurred. Clause 1. Effective immediately, all ownership, trademarks, and IP formerly assigned to Mr. Lane shall be transferred to Forge and Flint Innovations, to be managed exclusively by Mr. George Ellis. Clause 4. Mr. Lane relinquishes any future claims or disputes regarding Forge and Flint's technology or brand identity with irrevocable consent. Clause 7. This agreement is executed voluntarily with full awareness and legal counsel as certified by the attached electronic signature. I sat down, hard. Because there it was, at the bottom, my name. Signed in crisp black font, but I never signed that. I opened the second attachment, a resignation letter, typed in my style. My formatting, my usual salutation, except for one thing. I didn't write it. It was dated the same night my father was in the hospital. When I was in a room with no signal, watching his monitors beep into the dark. And then it hit me. George knew I was offline. He knew I wouldn't check my email, wouldn't log into anything. I had told him that. I had asked him to handle things for a few days while I stayed with Dad. And he had smiled, that perfect, polished George Ellis smile. Of course, Jeff. Take the time. I've got this. He didn't got this. He took it. The third attachment was a final board memo sent to our lead investors. Effective June 13, Jeffrey Lane has voluntarily stepped down from Forge and Flint to focus on personal ventures. We thank him for his groundbreaking contributions and vision that helped launch this company. There was no call, no meeting, no handshake, just deletion. I called George 3 times, no answer. I emailed him, no reply. I texted Liza. She responded instantly. He locked your admin access this morning, said it was standard IP security protocol. I didn't think, I thought maybe you were stepping away quietly. But this looks bad, Jeff. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the coffee dripping from the broken mug I dropped on the floor. My fingers were numb. Then finally, George called. He didn't sound guilty, didn't sound nervous. He sounded annoyed. Jeff, he said, I was just about to call you back. Cut the crap. A pause, then a sigh. Look, I know this feels like a betrayal, but you weren't handling things, Jeff. You were distracted, emotional. That's not what a company like this needs right now. You forged my name. No, I expedited a process we both knew was coming. You were pulling back. You weren't present. I was protecting the company. You stole my life's work. I salvaged it. There was steel in his voice now. No apologies. Just that confident, alpha CEO tone investors drooled over. You really think anyone's going to believe your side of this? He continued. I have the board, the lawyers. The patents are in Forge and Flint's name now. I was silent. So was he. Then he said the thing I'll never forget. You were always the brain, Jeff, but I'm the brand. And in this world, that's what wins. He hung up. I stared at the floor for what felt like hours. I remembered the first time we sketched out a brace on a diner napkin. The first investor pitch we gave where my hands were shaking and George clapped me on the back afterward, calling me a silent genius. I remembered building our first prototype together at 2 a.m. in my garage, soldering wires while he made late-night grilled cheese. 10 years of friendship, of building. All of it ripped from my hands like it never belonged to me. And he was right about one thing. He was the brand, but I was the thing he couldn't imitate. I was the soul. And he was about to learn what happens when you rip out a soul and pretend the body will keep walking. Loss isn't a single blow. It's 1,000 tiny cuts. Silent, invisible, but deep. And once they start bleeding, you can't tell where the pain begins or ends. The next morning, I walked into Forge and Flint's headquarters for the last time. Security stopped me at the front desk. The same guy, Aaron, who once high-fived me after our Series A funding win, now looked at me like I was trespassing. Jeff, sorry, man. You've been removed from the internal access list. Removed? I said quietly. He shifted uncomfortably. They said all former executives have to request appointments now. You're on a watch list, I guess. A watch list? Like I was a threat. He whispered, Do you want me to call someone? I didn't answer. I just turned around and walked out. The door clicked shut behind me like a sentence being finished. Later that afternoon, I checked our public-facing site. The About Us section had changed. George's photo sat at the top, CEO, founder, visionary innovator. My name was gone. The early credits that once read, Jeffrey Lane and George Ellis co-founded Forge and Flint with the shared goal of revolutionizing assistive tech, now just said George Ellis, founded Forge and Flint in 2018 with a mission to bring strength, dignity, and cutting-edge design to physical rehabilitation. No mention of me, not even a footnote. My story had been rewritten in real time by the man I once called brother. Calls stopped coming. My phone used to light up like a switchboard, investors, partners, engineers, accelerators. Now, silence. Worse, some people started actively avoiding me. My inbox was flooded not with support, but with, "Hey man, just wanted to clarify where we stand," or "Let's circle back when things settle down." Even people I mentored, people I gave job referrals to, ghosted. In the startup world, reputation is oxygen, and George had just suffocated me. Then came the money. My last stake in the company had been quietly diluted over the past 6 months. Legal sleight of hand, buried in board meeting addendums that George conveniently pushed through while I was distracted caring for my father or working heads down in the lab. I called my bank. My account was down to 4 digits. Forge and Flint had quietly halted all payouts to me, citing contractual review. The lawyer I called confirmed it. Technically, by signing that transfer agreement, you waived all claims to company revenue, equity, and dividends. But I didn't sign it, I said. He sighed. Then you'll have to prove that in court. But that could take years. Years I didn't have. A week later, I got the final slap in the face. A LinkedIn notification. George Ellis posted a photo from a tech summit. He stood on stage, grinning in a tailored suit, holding up the new model of my brace. The one I had prototyped in my garage 3 years ago. They'd rebranded it. The Ascent. The tagline read, "Innovation starts with courage." He didn't look like a thief. He looked like a goddamn savior. I spent that night drinking flat whiskey on the floor of my apartment. No lights, no music, just the glow of that image on my screen. It wasn't the money, it wasn't even the stolen recognition. It was knowing that I mattered less than the illusion he crafted around himself, that I was disposable in a narrative he controlled. I built Forge and Flint with my hands, my code, my sweat, and now I was watching it walk away with someone else's name on it. But somewhere in the dark, somewhere between the guilt and the rage, I felt something else rise. Not sorrow, not desperation, something cleaner, something cold, a single, quiet thought. This isn't how my story ends. Not with a press release, not with silence. George hadn't just stolen my company. He had declared war. He just didn't know yet that I was coming for everything. The walls of my apartment were too clean, too still. It was like grief had vacuum sealed everything. My dishes sat untouched in the sink. My fridge hummed in the corner like it pitied me. Even the dust avoided me, as if waiting to see whether I would collapse or combust. And maybe I did both. I hadn't showered in 2 days. My email inbox was a war zone of sympathy, half-hearted legal referrals, and a few vultures pretending to be journalists who just wanted my side. My phone stayed on silent. I couldn't stand to hear it anymore. It used to mean progress. Now it just sounded like failure calling back. But on the morning of the 9th day, I woke up cold. Not sad, not furious, just clear. And that's when I reached for the whiteboard. It stood against the wall, dusty and untouched since the early Forge and Flint days, the same one George and I had used to brainstorm the adaptive grip module over a bottle of Red Label and 3 hours of terrible jazz. I dragged it to the center of the room. I stared at the blankness, then picked up a red marker and wrote one word in all caps: revenge. Underneath it, in smaller letters, reputation, money, power, ego. I circled ego, because for George, everything boiled down to that. His legacy, his name on headlines, the speeches at tech expos, the photographs with CEOs. He didn't just want to win. He wanted to own the story. So I'd take it from him. Slowly, strategically, completely. I didn't want to destroy him in a dramatic blaze. No, that would make him a martyr in his own narrative. I wanted him to unravel, thread by thread, until he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. By noon, my table was buried in documents. Old contracts, patent registrations, investor decks, notes from our first pitch meetings. I opened an encrypted drive on my laptop, and there it was, the original voice-assisted brace schematic. Patent pending, Jeffrey A. Lane. Not Forge and Flint. He never noticed. George had always been too focused on what was shiny and new to respect the roots. But I remembered. I never let go of the original build, the prototype version that my uncle had first tested. It still worked, still had the potential to be better. It just needed resurrection and a new name. That night, I called Liza. I used a prepaid phone I picked up from a 24-hour convenience store in Southridge. Nothing trackable, just static and digits. She answered after 4 rings. Hello? It's Jeff. Silence. Then, where the hell have you been? I paused. Alive, barely. I need to talk. Jeff, if you're calling about Forge and Flint, I can't. Don't worry. I'm not asking you to pick sides. I'm asking you to remember who made you believe in what we built. She didn't hang up. We met 2 hours later at a quiet diner 20 minutes outside the city. Liza had always been straight to the point. No makeup, no heels, hair tied back in a pencil knot like she was always halfway into a problem set. She looked tired, worn. Is this safe? She asked, sliding into the booth. Safe enough, I replied, sliding a small manila folder across the table. She opened it slowly, the prototype schematic. Her eyes widened. You still had this? I improved it. Simplified the node grid. The new sensors use less than 40% of the original power. You rebuilt it? After everything? I nodded. I don't want to go backward, she whispered, almost to herself. I want to finish what we started, before he took it and twisted it. I leaned in. Then help me burn it down and build something better. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she looked up, her voice steady. I still have the Virexon contract on file, the one George signed. There are holes in it, big ones. A beat passed. You're in, I said. She lifted the coffee mug in a quiet toast. To revenge? I shook my head and smiled. To redemption.
Back in my apartment, I wiped the whiteboard clean.
This wasn't just about George anymore. This was about purpose, and purpose was fuel. I wrote one word in fresh ink across the board. Rook. Not king, not knight, not pawn. A rook. The most underestimated piece on the board. The kind that moves in straight lines and crushes everything in its path. And this time, I'd be the one playing the game. The first rule of war is this: build in silence. If George had taught me anything, it was that the loudest man in the room is usually hiding the most, and I wasn't going to make the same mistake. So I disappeared. No posts, no leaks, no name tied to anything. I set up an LLC under a shell corporation based in Delaware, funneled everything through a lawyer I trusted from college, someone who hated corporate drama and loved clean paperwork. The company name? Rook Adaptive Systems. I didn't rent an office. I didn't announce a launch. I didn't even print business cards. Instead, I went back to the beginning, to a warehouse. There used to be my uncle's welding supply lot, abandoned now, paint peeling from the corrugated walls, vines creeping up the west side. I swept it myself, cleared out old pallets, strung extension cords, and set up borrowed folding tables. One corner became the workshop, another, a makeshift server station. I used what was left of my personal savings to buy high-end processors and motion sensors off auction sites. I bartered for hardware. It felt like Frankenstein work, but it was mine. The second rule of war: choose your soldiers carefully. Liza came first. She brought her old ThinkPad, a pile of worn-out schematics, and the same fire I remembered from our startup days. We didn't talk about Forge and Flint. We talked about what came next. Next was Marvin Rios, a soft-spoken UX designer who once restructured our entire interface on a red-eye flight from Tokyo. George fired him after a budget cut. When I called, Marvin said, "About time," and drove 11 hours to meet us. Then came Aria, our data scientist, still bitter after George replaced her with a cheaper contractor and took credit for her user behavior prediction model. She wore a black hoodie and brought energy drinks in bulk. Piece by piece, the old team began to reform. Not everyone came. Some were too scared, others were too broken. But the ones who joined, they were loyal, because they remembered what Forge and Flint used to be before it was corrupted. Each night, we worked until past midnight. The new brace, codenamed Kite, was leaner, smarter. We scrapped the old design and rebuilt it from scratch. Modular controls, universal socket attachments, an adaptive learning algorithm that mapped the user's muscle memory in just 4 sessions. I watched my uncle test it in the warehouse one evening. his hand trembling until the device kicked in, then steady, precise. He smiled through tears. "Feels like it's mine again," he whispered. That was the moment I knew we were ready to fight. But first, we had to set the bait. I started feeding George rumors. Through fake accounts, we leaked whispers into venture capital forums, disability tech newsletters, and patent application aggregators. A new player is coming. No backers yet, but rumors say the brace adapts in real time. Better than Forge and Flint's clunky lineup. Of course, George noticed, and of course, he panicked. Within a week, Forge and Flint began fast-tracking updates to their brace, clumsy, rushed modifications to the system we designed 2 years ago. Bugs riddled their firmware. Their support team couldn't keep up. On Reddit, users complained. Meanwhile, we weren't even live yet. Then came the wild card, Dev Suresh. The man George really didn't want me talking to. Dev was a former investor, burned hard in our Series B round when George quietly buried a failed partnership under vague market volatility. He lost nearly $400,000 and walked away furious. I found him drinking at a jazz bar in West Elmhurst, his gray blazer slouched off one shoulder, tie loose, eyes dead. "You got balls showing up here," he said without turning. I sat beside him. "What have I told you George is going to fall harder than he made you?" He looked at me. "You've been promising fire for a year, Lane. I don't want sparks. I want ashes." I slid a USB across the bar. "Here's a demo. Real-time adaptation. We beat Forge and Flint in cost and efficiency." He raised an eyebrow. "What's it called?" "Rook Adaptive. Quiet now, not for long." Dev didn't answer right away, but when he took a sip of his drink and pocketed the drive, I knew I had him. He called 2 days later with a $2.5 million seed offer through an alias firm. We didn't even announce it, just smiled and kept building. The final phase of our blueprint was the trap. We fed George a lie, one last piece of bait. A leak suggested that Rook's brace was using a patented Forge and Flint algorithm. I knew George's ego couldn't resist. He launched a cease and desist letter within 72 hours. But here's the thing. The algorithm he accused us of copying, I wrote it 3 years before Forge and Flint even existed, and was registered under my name, not the company's. He walked right into it. Now, I had a countersuit ready, one that would open the door to every shady signature, every forged document, and every lie he'd buried beneath a lawyer's signature. It was no longer about revenge. It was about consequences. On the whiteboard in the warehouse, we wiped away the plan column and wrote one word across the top: execute. Rook Adaptive was ready. George just didn't know his kingdom was about to collapse. Power doesn't yell, it whispers. It smiles as it strangles you. That's the thought that ran through my head as I walked into the glass and marble lobby of Varkson Global headquarters with a black flash drive in my coat pocket and a bloodless plan behind my eyes. They'd summoned me for a clarification meeting, not a lawsuit response, not a settlement, not a negotiation. Clarification. The corporate word for let's make this go away before anyone notices. The woman I was meeting, Evelyn Sharp, was Varkson's head of strategic acquisitions. Her reputation in the tech world was clinical, not cruel, not warm, efficient, ruthless when needed, the kind of executive who could gut your company with a clause and still smile at your holiday card. I stepped off the elevator on the 52nd floor, receptionist, ice blonde, unreadable. She buzzed me in without a word. The glass door sighed open like a secret being revealed. "Mr. Lane," Evelyn said, rising from her chair with military precision. "Thank you for making time." She was younger than I expected, mid-40s, steel gray suit, no jewelry. Her hands didn't move when she spoke. Her eyes did all the talking. "I assume this won't take long," I said calmly, shaking her hand. "Depends on how much you're willing to give up," I smiled faintly. "You first." We sat across from each other at a black glass table in a room without a single personal item. The skyline stretched behind her like a painting, sunlight bouncing off the windows of buildings we used to dream about owning office space in. Evelyn opened a folder labeled Confidential. "Mr. Ellis claims you've unlawfully duplicated technology developed within Forge and Flint," she began. "If that's true, your current project, Rook Adaptive, constitutes a direct IP violation." Verexen has already absorbed those assets. This is a serious liability. Her tone was pleasant, even, almost rehearsed. But underneath it, I heard the threat. Stop now, or we bury you. I leaned forward and slid the flash drive across the table. Before you finish that sentence, you'll want to watch what's on there. She didn't move. What is it? Proof that the brace wasn't developed under Forge and Flint, that the patent predates George Ellis's involvement, and more importantly, I paused, a timeline showing at least 3 patent breaches and 2 forged signatures attached to your acquisition paperwork. Her eyes flicked to the drive, then back to me. Cold, calculating. You're bluffing. I shrugged. I don't bluff. I engineer. Silence. She inserted the drive into her laptop and opened the first file, a dated PDF with my name on the original schematic. Then another, a video recording of George emailing a modified document to himself from my account while I was on hospital Wi-Fi the night my father had surgery. Then a spreadsheet. This one got her. It was an internal ledger dump, a list of hush payouts from Forge and Flint's legal fund masked as research scholarships. One of them linked to a former employee with a confidentiality clause. Evelyn closed the laptop gently. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, you came prepared. No, I said. I came correct. She leaned back. This could trigger an internal review, possibly a board audit. I met her gaze. That's not my problem. What do you want, Mr. Lane? I leaned forward. You terminate your contract with George Ellis. Cease distribution of all Forge and Flint adaptive tech within 30 days. And you issue a press statement that your acquisition was misrepresented by Mr. Ellis and that you are evaluating alternate partnerships. She raised an eyebrow. You want us to apologize? No, I said. I want you to walk away before the ship sinks with you on it. Evelyn studied me for a long time. You're dangerous, Mr. Lane. I smiled. I learned from the best. 10 minutes later, I walked out of that building with no handshakes, no press photos, no grand announcements, just a quiet acknowledgement that the tide had turned. Evelyn didn't thank me. She didn't need to, because by that evening, I saw the signs begin to ripple. Virexen silently removed George's name from their investor portal. The press began poking holes in the acquisition timeline. One of their PR staffers anonymously leaked a tip to TechWatch that internal errors had compromised the partnership. George wouldn't see it coming, not yet. But the game had shifted. The queen was off the board. And now, it was time for checkmate. Revenge isn't fire, it's ice. Cutting, patient, and merciless. And now that Evelyn Sharp had quietly stepped back from Forge and Flint, the board began to wobble under George's feet. He didn't know it yet, but I had already mapped every square of his kingdom. I knew his investors, his engineers, his blind spots. All I had to do was push, check by check. It started small. A Reddit post from a former employee of Forge and Flint's testing division. We were rushed to launch an update with half-finished firmware. Safety testing was cut in half. CEO said to fix it in post. The post included a few internal memos and product crash logs from a beta test group, files I'd extracted months ago through Liza's old credentials. The thread exploded. Within 48 hours, the complaints hit the public review boards. Device malfunctions, faulty grip sensors, software crashes. Forge and Flint's Trustpilot rating dropped a full star. George's first move? Deny. He posted a sleek, rehearsed video on LinkedIn. We take pride in quality. We're investigating internally. He smiled through his teeth, but people didn't buy it. The comments were vicious. I saw Dev's firm quietly sell off half its shares before the market closed. One move down. The next wave came from Arya, our data scientist. She had kept receipts, literal ones, pay stubs that were altered after signing, emails from George's assistant requesting she reword her contributions before grant reports were submitted. Her name had been scrubbed from 2 research white papers she helped write. I connected her with a journalist from The Verge, someone I'd helped years ago with a product feature. We sent them redacted versions first, then full documents. The story dropped 2 weeks later. The shadow behind Forge and Flint. Inside the company that silenced its best minds. It wasn't a direct accusation of fraud. It didn't have to be. The damage was done. By week 3, George was scrambling. He scheduled a flashy product relaunch live stream, no doubt a Hail Mary to shift the narrative. All cameras, all ego. He stood under a halo of light, with Forge and Flint's newest brace model behind him on a rotating platform. But here's the thing. Liza had fed me the firmware version for that model, and I knew its flaw. It overloaded the battery module under prolonged strain. So just before the event, a concerned user posted a video showing the device sparking and overheating after 5 minutes of use. The live stream still went ahead, and mid-demo, the brace locked up on George's test subject. Frozen. Dead. Embarrassing. The internet devoured it in seconds. One YouTube commenter summed it up best: forge and flop. Investors began pulling out publicly. I watched them go, one by one, like birds fleeing a forest fire they'd smelled before the first flame. Now came my public re-entry. Rook Adaptive issued a short, confident press release. After careful review, Rook Adaptive has found multiple patent overlaps with Forge and Flint's recent releases. We are currently pursuing legal review and will release updates as necessary. I didn't have to sue. Just the threat of it, backed by well-timed leaks, tanked investor confidence. Shares in Forge and Flint dropped 14% in a day. Firexon released a bland corporate statement announcing disengagement from former F&F executive George Ellis. That's all it said. That's all it needed to say. George was officially radioactive. On the last day of the month, Rook Adaptive quietly went live. No press party, no countdown. Just a single post across our new site and socials. A video. It opened with my uncle, his hand shaking, lifting a cup of coffee. Then the new brace attached. Real-time stabilization. Smooth. Fluid. He smiled. I haven't done this in 7 years. No speeches, no voiceover, just results. The video hit 2.3 million views in 48 hours. Forge and Flint's last post. 3,200 likes, and a sea of angry comments. People don't want vision. They want proof. One final email. I sent it from an encrypted account, subject line, courtesy notice, before filing. Attached was the original brace patent, dated, authenticated, pre-Forge and Flint. I sent it directly to George's inbox. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. You think this is over? You made enemies, Jeff. Real ones. This was a war. You don't win wars by playing fair. I didn't respond, because I already had. I erased the last square on the whiteboard. The board was clear. The king was cornered. And now, it was time to look him in the eyes and let him see the ghost he created. The meeting request came in the form of a text. No sender name, just a number I knew by heart. You win. Come to the old warehouse. 1 hour. No punctuation, just resignation. The same warehouse where we built our first prototype, where we burned our fingers soldering circuits, where we talked about legacy, impact, changing the world. Now, it was just the place where I would bury him. Not with fists or fire, but with the one thing he never saw coming. Clarity. The sun was setting when I arrived. George stood inside, alone. His back was to me. He didn't turn when I stepped in. I figured it would end here, he said quietly. I didn't respond. I wanted him to speak first. Let him fill the silence with whatever guilt, arrogance, or regret still clung to him. He finally turned. No suit, no staged grin, just jeans, a wrinkled t-shirt, and the face of a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 weeks. Congratulations, he said. You got what you wanted. Did I? He laughed once, sharp, joyless. You tanked my company. Virexon dropped me, the board cut me out, even the damn interns won't answer my calls. You did that to yourself. I made Forge and Flint, he snapped. I made it matter. You stole it, I said flatly, from the person who actually mattered. His mouth opened to retort, but then he paused, closed it, looked away. I didn't plan for it to go that far, he said. I thought maybe you'd come back. We'd smooth it out. You'd build, I'd pitch, like always. You forged my name, signed me out of my life. That wasn't smoothing anything out. A long silence stretched between us. I stepped forward until we were 5 feet apart. No cameras, I said. No press, no spin, just the truth. He nodded, but didn't speak. So I gave it to him. You were right, I said. You were the brand. You knew how to shake hands and charm rooms and turn our pain into something polished. But when things broke, when the product failed, you didn't know what to do except lie. He swallowed. You lied to our investors, to the media, to me, and the worst part, George, you lied to yourself. His voice cracked. I didn't think you had this in you. You shouldn't have taught me how to fight dirty. He flinched. I let that hang in the air. Then I walked over to the workbench. Picked up the prototype brace, Rook, the one we built without him. I held it out. Here, the real version, the one that works, the one you'll never touch again. He didn't take it. I lost everything, he muttered. I nodded. Good. Was it worth it? He asked. Spending months tearing it all down just to make me feel what? Small? Weak? I looked him in the eye, calm and unflinching. No, it wasn't about making you feel small. It was about making you see what you actually are. His jaw clenched. You always thought you were the hero, I said, the visionary, the face. But in the end, you were just another thief with good hair and a hollow smile. I turned to leave. You'll never be able to build something again, he called after me. You'll always be known as the guy who destroyed Forge and Flint. I stopped in the doorway, looked back. I didn't destroy Forge and Flint. I rescued the part of it that mattered. And then I walked out into the night, never once looking over my shoulder. Rook Adaptive thrived. We kept it lean, honest, focused. Not a day goes by that I don't feel the weight of what happened, but it's no longer a chain. It's a scar, a reminder of who I became when everything was taken from me. Do I regret the revenge? No. But I learned something far more important. The people who destroy you don't expect you to rise. They expect you to stay broken. But I'm not broken. I'm just getting started.